Thank you so much, Edward. Appreciate it. I'm just going to, I don't have a presentation. I'm just going to give you 6 points that I'm going to discuss today that I think are very important to understand about what's going on in the United States from a political management perspective. And of course, we can have a discussion as to their relevance around the world. The first is party fragmentation here in the United States. That's been something that has a lot of political managers concerned. It does seem like the Democrats have 2 wings now, a moderate and a progressive wing. And it does seem like the Republican Party has the Trumpers and the not so Trumpers in their party. And we're seeing, in addition to that, you do have sort of the fragmentation there. But you also see a greater alignment in the party fragmentation between a correlation between ideology and partisanship. And that is the red team is getting redder, that's our Republicans, and the blue team is getting bluer, which is the Democrats. And concurrent with that is we see the rise of what's called negative partisanship being stronger than positive partisanship. In other words, people's affinities for their own party are weaker than their disaffinities for the other party. And that is something that certainly has been harnessed by a number of political managers and politicians in our country, none the least of whom was former President Donald Trump. The other evolving aspect of the political management universe in the United States, I would say, is this tendency now towards what we would consider some illiberal activities in the United States. Our trust in institutions is falling, and that had happened before the insurrection of January 6th that I'm sure all of you saw. And of course, the press being one of those institutions, certainly Donald Trump as candidate was able to really militarize that, weaponize it to his advantage, and that was really important. You would think that in the world of technology that some of the ethical issues involving campaigning and these illiberal tendencies would wane, and that people would be less likely to use them because they would be more likely to be caught, because everybody has their cell phones now and everyone is recording things on video. That hasn't been the case though. We've seen an increasing use of robocalls to give false information to voters, telling them that their polling station has been closed down or moved, or that the polling date has changed. So rather unethical and illiberal issue going on. We've also had the promulgation of false candidates, where people are being paid to run and say they're of a particular party, and they have no intention of running whatsoever, just taking the money, and the idea is that would fragment the vote for that political party. That actually happened in Florida this past election cycle. And along with this rise of illiberal tendencies is, I would say, and I don't want to certainly disparage anyone who is offended by free speech in the United States, but certainly corporations and politicians are being held to account for offensive speech in a way that they haven't before. And why this matters for political managers and candidates is that this redounds to their corporate sponsors and to their contributors. And oftentimes they're not really well, especially the corporations who are funding candidates and or funding our what you call the non-aligned interest groups expenditures. They may not know how to deal with these things and may not realize what one group takes as offensive. We've seen a lot of blowback to candidates and corporations who supported the members of Congress who were involved in the January 6th insurrection, or even just voted against the establishment of the January 6th commission to investigate it. So a lot of more public pressure and corporate pressure, and a big confluence going on here, especially because of social media. And that leads me to my next point, which is to talk a little bit about digital media. And of course, social media listening has become very important, both for corporations and candidates, to get an idea of what's going to be the next viral thing, what is the next problem that's going to come up that they have to deal with, who said something, and then they have to engage in some strategic public relations to deal with it. So that's really important. But the other thing that we realized about digital technology is it is not everything, right? We know that during the 2020 election, the Trump campaign still continued to do their door-to-door activities. They're canvassing and their on-the-ground activities, whereas the Biden campaign eschewed that for more of a digital approach. Some criticized Biden for campaigning from his basement, was sort of the criticism, and we know that gave an edge to some of what the Republicans were doing. So it still matters. Digital is not everything. Digital is just one component of a more cohesive strategy, and the ground game still matters. It does. There have been evolutions in micro-targeting with the voter files that the major parties have, and some of this has been used to direct social media messages and text messages and email messages to supporters. And it's not just targeting certain messages at people, but it's also through the use of A/B testing, which has promulgated recently in digital media research. Even the types of messages that are going out to different potential supporters are being changed, and so there's a lot of work going on there, and a lot of that. Some of that is married to some behavioral theories of political science and behavioral science. Some of it is not, but the better ones are and are getting better results. Another aspect of the digital changes in campaigning, one of the big things that's happening here in the United States is what's called OTT, which is over-the-top television. And what that means is people are getting their televised entertainment through apps. Either these apps are on their televisions, or they're on their computers, or on their phones. And this is a really under-resourced area for political managers for advertising. It's already 12% and growing exponentially in terms of the usage, but only 3% of the expenditures are going there in terms of overall spending. And remember that these apps are really good at capturing consumer data. That's one of the things that they do. And so this is a really big potential growth area for political managers. And of course, data security. A Republican contractor got hacked during the election, and that came out. So I know I don't have too much time. I was going to talk a little bit about research. Polling is not dead. Did the polls get it wrong in 2020? Kind of, sort of, but we also know the internal polls that were using the voter file to gauge who was going to be a likely voter were much more accurate. We know that the polls that were using text to web to catch people were much more accurate, because many people are just using their phones now as their only source of information. This is especially true in the Latino population in the United States. This was particularly true in South Florida, where the Democrats lost a couple of House seats and they didn't see it coming, but the Trump campaign knew it was coming because they were doing text to web survey analysis. And finally, I'll just leave you with changes in coronavirus for political managers. I talked a little bit about the Biden campaign versus the Trump campaign. It has actually given a little bit more of an edge to some lobbyists on Capitol Hill here, because they're able to do more meetings, and it looks like members of Congress and their staffs are willing to take more meetings via digital technologies like the Zoom platform we're on. We used to think, or we always think, that the personal is very, very important, but certainly getting your foot in the door is important too. And so the changes in digital technologies and
just should mention one minute.
Okay, wonderful. So I'll just wrap up. Staffers are more likely to accept meetings. Congress people are more likely to accept meetings, and so I don't think this is going to go away because so many more people have been able. It's going to be a marriage of both the common, let's get in a room and talk. But I think this is going to be a first step now in sort of a two-step process of lobbying as we move forward. So I'll end there.